Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Sounding Black podcast with Til and Will. This entire episode actually is more so going to be all about what the people want. I think we have some interesting topics to discuss, and with that, I'm going to kick it over to Will to jump off and let us know.
Yeah, man. So, we decided to do something different this time. We're doing strictly what the people want because there are two things that have been like flooding timelines and social media and the news that have very little to do with what's going on in the world, generally speaking. But people seem to be really enamored by it. So we're going to deal with Tristan teaming up with Jordan. And then Jamal's downfall, Jussie Smollett's recent, I don't even know what you want to call it. I mean, I'm going to stick to my wait and see just because I said it.
Right. Oh, God.
But however you want to characterize that, man. So,
dude, if you haven't seen it, Trevor Noah actually created an entire segment on his show. And essentially, he created a lifetime trailer for this story. It's really interesting because the way he laid it out, it was like, obviously he was saying that Jussie has been lying, which we don't know 100% for sure what the truth is, but the way he laid it out is quite hilarious. And I think if you haven't seen it, you should take the time to look at it.
I definitely will. Trevor Noah's pretty funny, so I'll definitely look at it.
So for those who don't know, Jussie Smollett has been indicted with filing a false police report and could be facing 1 to 3 years of imprisonment. So essentially what happened is one morning in Chicago, I think it's about 2 a.m., he's supposed to be out looking for something to eat, and he is attacked. So when this story initially came out, like it seemed like it was some racist attack, some homophobic attack, something that was attached to something along those lines.
Right.
And as more of the story came out, it's just like, okay, something's off about this.
Well, before that, remember, I think he had he went back later and added the MAGA part. So it was racial and gay slurs, if I'm not, or homophobic slurs, and then subsequent there was the MAGA part that was added to the story,
right?
If I'm not mistaken.
And so with that, I wanted to make sure we had a chance to point out what Jussie said is he never said they were wearing a MAGA hat,
right?
He said this MAGA country,
right? So
he said that in his interview, obviously, which if you haven't seen the interview, that's another thing you should watch because...
What, Robin Roberts?
Yes, because part of it, like, it makes you cringe because of how it's all laid out. And again, we're not 100% certain what's true, what's false, because the way I saw that story develop, one day, they were saying everything he was saying was true. The very next day, everything's false. And, like, the more of this story develops, I'm like, you know what? Let me just wait and see.
But and this is the crazy thing. But that's why that's why I said it in the first place in our very first episode, because it's not because everybody lies or everybody makes up stuff. It's just because it does happen, and I think the majority of people think things like this don't happen. So we say wait and see because we just want to make sure that this isn't one of those scenarios where people are making things up,
right?
You know, but for Jussie, man, this is crazy. I mean, like I remember like when I first saw it, and I think we even posted something about it. Like everybody felt like, damn, I can't believe, you know, this country is like that, you know,
right?
And that doesn't. I mean, this one incident doesn't erase other things that have happened, but I'm just saying, like you have this feeling like, oh, this is so crazy. And then you watch the video when there's this idea that he might be making it up. Mm-hmm. Like, I think I don't want to misquote him, but there was some point he was just like, you would have to be freaking or crazy to make something like that up.
Yeah,
like
he
says something like that, right? And you're like, but if he's lying, would he really say it?
Uh-huh.
And then you get
he insists that he's not making it up. He insists he's not making it up. But all the evidence points in the other direction, so...
Well, have you seen the text in the check? I mean, they said they exist.
Well, I saw the fake check.
That was hilarious.
I did see that. And that in itself is interesting because at some point, Jussie decided he was going to do this public appearance where he called himself the gay Tupac. I don't know where that came from, but he wanted to make sure that people understood that he fought back. And I don't know where Tupac connects with that, but he said he's the gay Tupac, and people just ran with that. I like the check that I saw obviously was a joke, but he on that check it literally said gay Tupac, $3,500 to the Nigerian brothers. Like that's literally what it said on the check.
Yeah, so that clearly was a joke.
Obviously, you can't let social media have anything because once they get hold to it, there's no telling what's.
Isn't that the saying? The internet is undefeated.
Exactly. Forever will be. I don't see the internet losing at anything.
Oh, crazy, man. But yeah. So anyway, the whole issue with Jussie, I think, brings up a couple of topics that we kind of want to discuss before we hop into this Tristan situation. But I think one of the first things is something Robin Roberts said, and a lot of people have been saying, and I'm curious to get your view and our listeners' view, because I think what Robin Roberts said, and I'll try to find the exact quote, she says that it's a setback for race relations, homophobia, MAGA supporters. I cannot think of another case where there is this anger on so many sides, and you can understand why there would be. And the reason I bring that up is because there are two things that have come up on social media that I found to be interesting. Is one, people saying that it's a setback for racial issues. It's a setback for or gay rights or the LGBT community. So what are your thoughts about it being a setback? This one particular person lying about one thing. I see I'm framing the answer for you. I tell you what I want you to think. But what are your thoughts about this idea that this one person creates a setback for these things that are real to so many people?
I disagree.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly disagree. Because this is one individual, and again, I just want to make a point that we don't know with 100% certainty whether he's telling a lie or not.
But let's just say yes. For the sake of argument.
For the sake of the argument, if he is lying about this entire thing, I still wouldn't consider it a setback for any community, whether it be the black community, the gay community, or racial issues. Reason being is we're putting the onus on him. We're putting the burden on one person's shoulders to represent entire communities.
Right.
That's irresponsible on anybody's part in that regard, because now we're saying if this one person is this way, everybody's that way. And it gets back to the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago. We don't represent everybody who's black.
Right.
We have our own perspectives, and there's a bunch of people who may agree with the way we think, and a bunch of people who may react in certain situations the way we react, but we don't necessarily represent everybody. Right. So to put it out there and say it's a setback, I don't necessarily think it is. I think at the end of the day, you look at it as its own issue for this particular person.
Right.
But I don't think he's necessarily shifting the conversation for the black community in terms of racial relations. I don't think he's shifting the conversation in terms of how we look at heinous acts that happen to gay people.
Right.
Because I honestly think we should be having more conversations about what happens to people who are transgender, people who are gay, because even within the black community, I think oftentimes we unfortunately dismiss those conversations when that happens to people who are transgender, that happens to people who are gay, because we don't necessarily think they represent us because they don't have the same sexual orientation that we do. But these people are still black. They're still humans. So we have to approach those conversations and look at them as who they are and not necessarily, how their sexual orientation is. But I think, again, that's a entirely different conversation.
Right.
But my point is, I don't think this is a setback for anybody. This is just one situation where this guy just happened to create this story, if we're saying that for the sake of this conversation, and it should sit on its own. Let that happen to Jussie.
Right.
That doesn't need to happen for anybody else.
Yeah, and I think that was my biggest concern. I just think it's irresponsible, and I actually love Robin Roberts. I think she's a good reporter or journalist, I should say. It's just, to me, when you have people with influence making those kind of comments, they're fueling that narrative, because you are now tying Jussie's potential lie to the validity of these issues. Mm-hmm. These issues truly do exist. And just because one person makes it up, or even a couple of people makes it up, doesn't invalidate all of these other legitimate and righteous claims.
Exactly. And
that kind of brings me to this other point. And someone else, they made this comparison online, and the way the guy made the comparison was foolish, and he got attacked for it. But he was trying to compare Jussie to women who are accusing men of sexual assault. I wish I could remember who the guy was so I could pull up the exact tweet, but it kind of brings into that same issue where if, I think you had brought up the statistic before, 90% of these allegations, or more than 90%, are truthful and accurate. Now, the question is, obviously with that small percentage that are inaccurate, someone is lying, making things up, or exaggerating. Right. But we can't sit back and use that minor percentage to invalidate everyone else that's telling the truth.
Exactly.
All you're supposed to do with that information is, at least for a moment, just reserve your full, your final judgment until you have enough information to make a decision.
Right.
But we shouldn't use it to invalidate an entire movement or an entire category of people, or an entire category of crimes or allegations or anything like that. So, I mean, I just think it's irresponsible for people to try to make the connection.
Yeah, I mean, making that connection to me is asinine. I don't even know why you would equate those two things, because this is somebody who's creating a story about an attack.
Right.
And these are women who face scrutiny in many capacities because of the stuff they've experienced.
Right.
If 100 of these cases come up and I take a stance that every woman is telling the truth, 94% of the time I'm going to be right.
Right.
And I'm totally comfortable if I take that stance of being 94% right and 6% wrong, because that's how the numbers shake out. But to compare those two things, I think whoever said that deserve every bit of flack they receive for that.
And they got a lot of flack.
Yeah,
they got a lot of flack. Yeah.
I'm actually, that kind of pissed me off, to be honest with you. I don't even know why you would put these two things in the same bucket.
And a lot of people were saying that. I think that was the issue. They were like, where do you see that connection? Why are you even bringing this up?
Right.
And I think, actually, I'm not even going to try to justify. I don't even know what the dude was thinking. So let's move on from him. He had more attention than he deserves.
Oh, already. Man.
So I know you kind of laid out, and we've discussed a bit about some of the stuff that Robin Roberts said and other people that think like that. But what do you think the repercussions are going to be of this entire incident if it comes out that he was indeed lying?
Well, first and probably the most damning repercussion for him is going to be imprisonment.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, you're also basically, in many cases, ending your career, because people will always view you as this guy who created this story for no particular reason other than advancing your career. So to me, the repercussions are those two things. And as a result of that, there can potentially be some psychological things that happen. We don't know what all of this leads to, but the repercussions are really all on Jussie. I don't think it necessarily means anything for anybody else. Obviously, everybody from the Empire cast can continue to have their careers, and all the Empire family, whoever they may include in terms of production, they'll be okay.
Right.
I don't think this means anything for the gay community in those terms. I don't think it means anything for the black community or people who support Trump.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think all it did really is, if it turns out to be true, he's given people a talking point, and he's given them a frame of reference for the next time some allegation comes up.
Right.
So if someone is attacked and there's an allegation that a Trump supporter is involved, it allows people to quickly say, remember Jussie Smollett, or Smollett. Something happens with race relations. It allows somebody to say, remember, So I don't think it's a setback. I don't think the repercussions will be a setback, but I do think that the repercussions generally will be that people will be able to use it. And this isn't, it won't go far because, things will shake out,
right,
over time, but it at least allows that to be an initial response, whereas the response really should be something about, us considering, what's actually, what the actual allegations are,
right, And to that point, when you talk about all the actions that have been committed by Trump supporters and all the acts that we've seen come to light and be true, that argument doesn't lay on any strong foundation.
No. But it's a distracting argument.
It's certainly a distracting argument.
That's the point of it, I think, is what happens is he's allowed by doing this, and maybe that's what Robin Roberts and other people meant when they said it was a setback, but he's allowed the distraction to exist when there's ever a claim of anybody related to MAGA, racial inequality, or gay rights.
Right.
So I think that's the bigger repercussion, like more globally.
Right.
But for him personally, honestly, I don't care what the repercussions are. Because I think it was stupid, it was irresponsible. If it's true, I have to keep saying that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think part of it is him wanting to create this in the first place is because of all the things that have happened across the country when you talk about white nationalists who have committed crimes against people of color and all the things that they've done. I mean, we saw a few weeks before any of this ever came out that, you had these kids shouting out this Native American veteran or shouting at him, and, he's doing what he does, and then we, glorify the kid in some capacity. I shouldn't say we because I obviously didn't, but I'm saying, they gave him spotlight on the news. They allowed to shine light on how good of a kid he was.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we see white nationalists committing all types of crimes against people of color. I saw something the other day, like this U.S. Coast Guard lieutenant who self-identified himself as a white nationalist. He was arrested for planning a mass terror attack. So these things are happening. Right. If you're going to try to present an argument that says otherwise, like, bro, get out of here. We ain't got time for that.
Oh, by the way, that kid, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're suing the Washington Post, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check my source, but not like that. Like I have an inside source.
Yeah, right.
I read it in the article. I just don't remember if they said it was Washington Post or not. But I think he's suing the Washington Post.
Well, that sounds about right because I know Trump doesn't like Jeff Bezos, and Jeff Bezos is connected to the Washington Post, from what I remember. Gotcha. So it makes sense. It all comes around.
Man. So now that we kind of got everybody, if they weren't already caught up with Jamal, let's move to something that's been to be honest with you, I think is a lot more interesting. Mm-hmm. Tristan.
Man.
I
don't even know where to start.
This guy, he's somehow putting up more stats off the court than on the court. And I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, clearly the guy has a long history of cheating. And for those who don't know, the way Tristan and Khloe Kardashian's relationship began, from what I recall, his baby's mother was pregnant to begin with. And he decided to, while she was pregnant, pursue a relationship with Khloe Kardashian.
Yeah, I think I remember something like that.
So part of the reactions I've seen, I totally understand, to be honest with you, because a lot of women, in many cases outside of this one, you'd expect them to support the woman who is suffering. But again, Khloe had him cheat before in their relationship.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, it was right around the time she was pregnant, getting ready to have the baby. And Tristan's other baby mama,
goodness.
Also, her name's Jordan. So it's like
it's all coming full circle.
This process is repeating itself. And so how do you feel bad for a person in a situation when, she got him the wrong way and then she, accepted his cheating ways in a sense? And that's not to say I have a certain opinion. Well, obviously I do have a certain opinion, but it's not to say that I don't feel bad for Chloe, because I don't want that to happen to anybody, especially in a situation like that. But do I have less? Do I have less? What's what I'm looking for?
Sympathy.
Less sympathy.
Yeah.
Do I have less sympathy for her? Sure.
Yeah. So you said a lot in that. And we're just gonna go ahead and break it down, because that's what we do. You were talking about some of the backlash on social media, and I saw some of it too. And a lot of it was honestly that's what she gets. I saw that a lot. And for me, I didn't know exactly what people were saying, because a lot of it was coming from, everybody. Let's just say everybody was saying, but there was a large number of black women that were saying it. So initially, I thought the response was because Chloe was non-black and Tristan was cheating with a black woman. And then I also found out that it was, that she, when she came into the picture, he already had a woman.
Right.
And, it goes back to that old saying, they say you lose them the same way you get them, you know?
Right.
So I don't really know the motivation for the women that were saying that's what you get, except for those who actually laid out why they were saying it. Mm-hmm. But either way, it's definitely an interesting conversation, right? Because on one end, there's this idea of, okay, outside of the racial component, let's just go with the you get them, you lose them how you get them. If a woman is cheating, with a man, and she carries on and that turns into a fruitful relationship with children, even marriage or whatever it may be, does she deserve that same sort of treatment because she participated in it in the begining? Mm-hmm. And the overwhelming response was yes, from social media. But I mean, do you think that? Because I don't know. I feel like you end up paying for what you dish out.
Right.
I'm a believer in karma.
Exactly. Karma
but
comes
I don't
back
know
around.
if it comes in exactly the same way, because there's so many other things associated with it. Like, for instance, they have a child together that is completely innocent, has nothing to do with this.
Exactly.
I don't know the state of his relationship with his first kid's mom. Whether that was something that was on the brinks already or what. I don't know the nature of it.
Yep.
But the one thing I think we all can be pretty clear about is that he is a serial cheater. So
absolutely.
So that kind of brings me to that other thing you brought up when you said that she accepted him back. There's a lot of opinions about whether women or anybody, not even just women, whether people should accept somebody back for cheating, and I think we should get into that.
I think everybody's situation is different.
Yeah.
So you never know unless it's public knowledge, like in the case of Tristan and Chloe.
Yeah.
You never know what is involved in that situation. You never know who's going to be impacted by that. So when you ask if you should accept somebody back after they cheat, well, not making any excuse for anybody who cheats.
Right.
What I'm saying is, there could be kids involved. Some people want to stay for the kids. Some people want to stay for their own, their own mental healing. That's all part of it.
Right.
So when you ask if somebody should accept somebody for cheating, well, if I'm gonna be honest, the answer immediately that comes to mind is no. But I can't say with 100% nobody ever should accept anybody back for cheating, because everybody's situation is unique. So I know it makes it a lot more difficult to do when everybody can see it.
Yeah.
And everybody's fully aware of what's happening. But
man,
whatever your situation says.
And that's the interesting part, man, because I think that it really isn't on an individual basis.
Right.
Because to me, man, you have to think about all of these things that matter to you. And so many times you'll hear people say, oh, you know, they did it for the kids. They took somebody back for the kids, or they took somebody back because they didn't know anything else. Like they've been with them so long, you know, like whatever the reason is, people find a way to make their way back to somebody. And, you know, sometimes these stories work out, you know, sometimes someone cheats and, you know, the situation pans out, but at least from what you see with like a lot of these relationships, you know, because the ones that ever get brought to us, it's not like you have friends that come and tell you like, you know, I'm cheating. Like, so we usually don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Right. But like with celebrities, you see it all the time, right? Exactly. And I don't know, I can't think of any scenarios where the celebrities have gotten back together and it's worked out long term. Yeah. And I think that would just, you know, that's kind of a microcosm of what happens in everyday life. The only difference being that I think when it happens with non-celebrities, not everybody knows. Right. So you don't have any pressure coming from the outside. Like, for instance, you know, like with Cardi B and Offset. Like, there's so much pressure from other people about what she should or shouldn't do. Whereas if it just happened to you, you're a non-celebrity, that's like you really just get to figure out what's best for you. And if you have kids, what's best for your kids, you know.
And you know, 2 points I want to make is like with Cardi B and Offset was like trying his best. Yeah. And so when people were saying, "Oh, you shouldn't take him back," like, well, you don't necessarily know what led to that situation. Yeah. You don't know. And Offset is like another person I think is a serial cheater. So I was in my mind, I'm thinking like Cardi shouldn't accept him back. Like she should move forward with her life and, you know, do what she believes would help her along those lines in terms of her career, her personal well-being, all of those kinds of things. Yeah. But, you know, on the flip side of that, part of her personal well-being is obviously knowing this guy and having him involved with her child's life.
So which she can do without him being her significant other.
Certainly. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. And that's why I say, like, each person's situation is so unique that when you have public opinion hounding and saying this, and that, well, you don't know all the details. You don't know what that person deals with on a personal level. Yeah. So it's kind of like, yeah, we can have our opinions, but everybody's still going to make their own decision. And again, you know, I think when you talk about having kids involved, I think that's probably the biggest reason why in situations like this, people decide to like, okay, let's see if we could do it. But that also, from a mental perspective, you're still going to be playing these things in your mind. Like, well, you know, from a woman's perspective, I'm at home with the child or whatever, and I don't have the support of my guy, and he's out. Could he be cheating? Like, that's just so much when you talk about stuff like this. Yeah. And this is another conversation we could go on about forever. So with Tristan and Chloe, like, I kind of thought this whole thing was inevitable.
Yeah, man. It's weird because I think that idea about the kids is always a very easy, common link between people. But if you start looking at what's best for your kids, man, it really comes back to what's best for you, you know, the person who's been cheated on. Right. Because if you're not going to be able to get over it, and it creates some sort of depression or it creates some sort of toxic, you know, toxicity in the house, your kids see that. Or if it's something that's done in front of your kids and they know that you've been wronged, you're teaching your kids about, you know, whether or not they should accept being treated that way and, you know, whether they can treat people that way.
Because eventually the kids grow up.
So, I mean, that I think is something people have to consider too, because it's not just the idea of keeping the family together. So, for instance, like, I'm not going to, like, you know, I don't profess to know what Cardi B should or shouldn't do, but, or even Chloe, but the idea is that everything that happened to them is public and will be around when their kids grow up. And you also have a person who is going to have influence in your son or daughter's life, who is a serial cheater. Do you want that person imparting moral wisdom, you know, or creating the moral compass for your child.
Yeah.
And, and you can kind of distance, if not distance, because these guys do still have a right to be involved in their child's lives, but do you want them around every single day?
Yeah.
Having that big of an influence.
And honestly, I literally just thought about this, and I don't know how, when we talked about people who have accepted guys back, Beyonce and Jay-Z situation.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably the biggest one. And it looks like things are working really well for them.
I forgot about that.
So it's like, in that situation, I saw a lot more people. Like, there were definitely a lot of people saying that she shouldn't accept him back. But I saw a lot more people than in, like, Cardi and Offset situation saying that, all right, B, like, you got back with him, we support you.
But did Jay-Z get, like, caught the way that these two did? Because that's what
Beyonce made a whole song.
She made a song, but that's just like, here's what I'm saying. Like, to me, the difference between those is that with Beyonce and Jay-Z, there was like, first of all, it was like, oh, I wonder why Solange kicked his ass in the elevator. You know, it could have been. Right. And then it was like, oh, that Lemonade song. I wonder if she talking about, is that real?
Yep.
And everything, and then even I think he did an interview on Van Jones' show or something like that, where he kind of danced around it, but didn't say that he cheated on her. So for me, for them, their stuff was public in the sense that they were public figures, but it wasn't like this guy's caught on tape or here's screenshots from his side chicks or anything like that. So I feel like those kind of got swept under the rug and Beyonce didn't have to deal with as much scrutiny because of it.
I think Jay in that situation dealt with more scrutiny than anything. Because
he's ugly and she's not.
Well, I mean, not necessarily that, but like Beyonce's song, she said like, "You're gonna lose your wife." Basically, you keep on playing with me, you're gonna lose your wife. And then Jay addressed it in one of his songs that
I remember that
he was, how could he do that to Beyonce? How could he do that to Blue? So it's like in that situation, Beyonce and Jay-Z aren't typically public in terms of their relationship. As far as like the ins and outs of what happens. So for them, those two figures, as big as they are, to put out two separate songs about it and address it and talk about a family feud and things of this nature, from the society's perspective, is it okay to accept J and B for who they are and not accept Cardi and Offset for who they are? So like,
no, it should be the same.
It should be the same. That's what I'm saying. So like, what is the at what level are we saying it's okay here, but it's not okay here? Like,
here's the thing. I don't even know if it's that it's okay. I think to me, what it really just boiled down to is just like it slipped your mind. I think it's just something that slips people's mind because it's not so, like, like you have to put it all together or remember this verse from that song where these others, like, these are pictures, man. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Like, we see this stuff and then not only that, like we said, these are serial cheaters. So even when you kind of forget, then they do something else and they get caught again. And there's
and the thing was, like, I think part of the story was Tristan took people's phones, but he like just completely disregarded the people who were there. Like, bro, come on.
So that brings us to our other question, man. This Jordan lady, and Kylie.
People were cheering her on, by the way.
Cheering who?
Jordan on.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation. I mean, that goes back to that other conversation we had. I don't know if we have enough time in this show, but we can touch on it if you want to. But the first question I have for you is this idea, man, like if you are the best friend, and I don't even know if it has to be best friend, but let's say something happens, right? Where you know that
this sounds like a setup question, and I'm like so afraid of what he's about to ask me right now.
No, because this happens, man. Like sometimes it happens where a person is knowledgeable of the cheating, right? Like you're knowledgeable of it, but you're friends with the people involved. Mm-hmm. Like what do you do? Like where do your loyalties lie? Do you say something? Do you not say something? Are you responsible for saying something? Yeah. Like how does that even play out? So, for instance, in Kylie's case, this is her best friend.
Yep.
And if these two are making out, something about it just seems weird. Like, is this a first-time thing, or has there been some sort of chemistry Has there been something that made him feel like that she would even be willing to do anything like that? And is it anything that Kylie picked up on, that she should have disclosed or maybe did disclose? I don't know. So I guess the question is, when you are in a scenario where you know of some cheating going on in your circle or people you know, what's your duty? Do you have one?
Well, I think it's so situation dependent because, say for instance, if I have a friend and I don't have friends who cheat. So if I have a friend who I know is cheating on, let's just say, some woman or shoot even some guy,
right?
That I have no idea who he is or who she is, like, I'm probably just gonna chill. Like, that's not my responsibility to go tell this random dude who I may or may not know that, hey, I have a really close friend and they're cheating on you.
Right.
But Kylie's situation is a little bit different. Like, that's her sister's man cheating with her best friend. And in that situation, your ties will typically lie with your family.
They should.
So you're probably going to say something. In my mind, if I know this chick out here cheating, regardless of the relationship that I have with her, or I think a more probably appropriate example is if I'm really close to a friend and I know he's cheating on my sister, first off, like me and the friend, we got issues because you're cheating on my sister. But of course, I'm gonna tell my sister that. So after I lay hands on this dude, then my sister will know why I did it.
Right. And that's the interesting part because that just kind of highlights what depends on how close you are. Because I don't think anybody here is condoning cheating. Right. But it's just like how willing am I to get involved?
Exactly.
It depends on the closeness. Exactly. Like, so if it's just like two friends, I know them from work, and I know something, I'm just like, that's their thing.
That's your situation.
You just kind of take a step back and try not to tip anybody off that you know anything. You just don't want to be a part of it. If it's a family member or a very close friend, it's that same situation. Like, oh man, I don't know what to do. But when it starts getting closer to home, where it's like, oh, something's happening to your sibling or something's happening to your mom, do you step up? Do you say something?
Right.
And that kind of brings us to this other topic where guys were talking about this. I think it was, I don't remember what social media platform, but someone had posted something about men having like an obligation to set other men straight in situations like this. Like, why is this stuff being condoned by other men? Like in essence, we are creating this culture where it's acceptable to cheat. And women are kind of being put in a position where they're accepting it as well because it's, they're being convinced that it happens anyway. Yeah. So if a guy has all these other qualities, then you may as well just deal with the cheating because whoever else you get is cheating too. Right. So what do you think about like our responsibility to kind of lay it out and essentially redefine what it means to be a man? Right.
So the way I'm looking at this is, again, like I said, I don't have friends who are out here cheating, so I don't have to necessarily deal with this personally. And I'm being serious when I say this. I'm not just saying I literally don't have friends who cheat. So in my mind, if I'm in a situation where, let's say I have a friend who, I think Chloe and Tristan have been together for a few years now.
Right.
If I have a friend, and even if I'm not close to the woman, and he's been with his lady for a while, and he's out here doing reckless stuff, it's my responsibility as a man to come to him and say, bro, like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? Yeah.
Like, this is, one, is not acceptable, but two, you're risking something much bigger than, a one-night stand or whatever it may be.
Right.
So think about what you're representing and think about the life that you want to create. Are you putting yourself in a position where it makes sense to risk it? Because in my mind, it doesn't.
Right.
It never does. When you talk about cheating, I think there's two things you can do. You either, you let the person know and you decide to go your separate way, or you're going to just continue to do whatever and just wait until they find out. Like those are like
that sounds like a time bomb.
because because the fact of the matter is, what's done in the dark is gonna come to the light.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, my perspective is, if I have a friend and I know he's out there just being reckless, all of those things I just said, like, it is our responsibility as men to make sure we're not fostering this culture.
Yeah.
And we don't continue to have friends who are out here doing stuff like that. Because in many situations, say for instance, if you have friends who are in relationships and they're out doing stuff like that, at some point, if you're kicking it with this person,
they're gonna drag you into.
They're gonna drag you into some situation.
I should say,
not necessarily that you're gonna be cheating, but they're gonna drag you into it somehow.
That you're in a compromised position.
It's almost like you're an accomplice in a way.
Yeah.
So,
well, I was thinking more along the lines that, like, for instance, like, if you have a group of friends, like if you have a good group of friends and they're not involved in anything like that, then when you go out with them, you don't find yourself at risk of having any sort of situations like that. Whereas if you have a group of friends who want to run to this place or that place, what'll happen is at some point, even if you don't want to be involved in something like that, then they can put you in a scenario where you got to make decisions and you got to make judgment calls that you wouldn't have to make if you were with the right kind of folks. And that's the reason I kind of brought it up is our obligation, because I think really when we have people that we're close to, you want to protect them and make sure that they do the right thing.
Right.
But on the same note, you also have people who take that approach, but then will celebrate someone for having multiple women.
Right.
That's not their friend.
Right.
So it's kind of like you send this mixed message, because on one end you're celebrating this one thing that you're condemning when it's someone close to you.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part to me. Is like we need to take this position where if you're going to condemn it, and we should, it's got to be condemned all the way around. Stop celebrating people calling him a pimp or a stud or a player in a positive way. Right?
We could have a long conversation about this.
I'm sure we will.
Like, fact is right. Because fact of the matter is, when you look at that, for example, you have men who celebrate women on Instagram who don't have clothes on, but if their woman wants to do it, then they have an issue with it. You take an issue with it. So
it's the idea of what message are we really sending?
Exactly. So there's so many situations where you could probably make an example like that, but it ultimately comes down to the type of person that you want to be and what your character is.
Right.
Because true character comes around when people aren't aware of what you're doing, and you're doing that. So there you go.
Man, I feel like we'll wrap up soon, but I'm guessing that this is definitely something that we will have to revisit. So I think for the wind down, really, I just want to pose the questions rather than us recap anything, and just have people kind of give us some feedback or even information about their thoughts on that particular subject. First being like with the Chloe and Tristan situation and just cheating in general. If somebody is willing to actually say that they've been cheated on or that they've cheated, and they are willing to share that story, we'd love to hear it.
Yep.
And we'll figure out a way to get you on the show to kind of talk about that situation, so we can add some like real life scenarios to these things. And then the other question that we wanted to pose.
What would you do if your best friend is like cheating with your sibling's boyfriend? Like, where do your loyalties lie in that situation? So,
and then even outside of that, because I think that one, when it's the sibling, that one becomes a little easier. But what happens when you have two best friends? Like, like, well, not even best friends, but like
two close friends.
Two close friends. Like, you may have started out knowing the man or knowing the woman, and then grew to know the other person.
Right.
So you at some point feel close to both.
Exactly.
Do you ever feel like it's incumbent upon you to tell? All right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot to discuss, and we would love to hear feedback from all of you. So I think that's one of the things we want to make sure we do a better job of, is just listening to what you guys say, even outside of what the people want. We want to know how you feel about these topics. So the more you share with us, the more we'll share with the world. So with that said, this is Sounding Black. I'm Til.
And I'm Will.
And we're sounding off.